Welcome to Her Secret Truth, a place where the truth always comes out. Here you'll hear stories of family betrayals, hidden secrets, and shocking revelations. Every story is a step closer to the truth someone tried to hide. Subscribe to Her Secret Truth so you don't miss new stories you won't be able to stop watching. My farm was destroyed in a summer wildfire, so I went to my daughter's house, hoping to find a place to stay. But her husband stopped me at the door. He made it clear that I would ruin his Persian rug and said there was no room in his home for someone in my situation. With no other choice left, I called my late neighbor's son, a boy I had once raised like my own, who had now become a billionaire. No one knew I still had his number. Later, when his helicopter landed right on their lawn and he said that he was truly glad to have me there, everything began to change. Follow my story until the end and write the city you are watching from so I can see how far it has reached. I never thought I would end up standing at my own daughter's doorstep, asking for somewhere to sleep. At 64 years old, with nothing but the clothes I was wearing and the strong smell of smoke still clinging to my hair, I knocked on Kelly's spotless white door with shaking hands. The wildfire had taken everything. 43 years of memories, hard work, and dreams were gone in a single afternoon. My farmhouse, the barn where I had raised prize-winning cattle, and the apple orchard my late husband George had planted with his own hands, all of it was gone. The insurance adjuster told me it would take months to process my claim, and even then it might not cover the cost of rebuilding. I had nowhere else to go. Kaya opened the door wearing a silk blouse that likely cost more than what I used to spend on groceries in 3 months. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows lifted when she saw me, and her eyes moved over my soot-stained jeans and the small duffel bag with everything I had managed to save. She asked what I was doing there, and her voice carried that same tone of inconvenience I had noticed for years. I explained that the farm had burned down and that I had lost everything, but my voice broke even though I tried to stay strong. I added that I was hoping to stay with her and Louis for a few days while I figured things out. Before she could answer, Louis appeared behind her. He had always cared about appearances, but the look on his face when he saw me was pure shock. He immediately refused, stepping slightly in front of his wife and pointing out how I looked, saying I was covered in ash and dirt and that I would ruin his Persian rug, which he emphasized had cost $15,000. I felt my cheeks burn with shame and tried to explain that I could clean up first, and that I only needed a little time. But he interrupted me, saying that what I needed was to solve my own problems. His voice sounded cold, and he continued by explaining that they had a certain lifestyle where image mattered a lot. He added that he could not allow someone like me to stay in their home, especially when his business partners might visit. The way he described me hit hard. In that moment, I understood that in his eyes I was no longer family, just a burden. Kaya shifted slightly beside him, clearly uncomfortable, but she said nothing against him. My own daughter, the one I had cared for when she was sick at 6 years old, the one I had worked double shifts for so she could study, stood there in silence while I was being called homeless. I quietly begged, reminding her that I had raised her and sacrificed everything for her, asking if that meant anything at all. For a second I thought I saw something in her eyes, maybe guilt or regret. But then Louis placed his hand on her shoulder, and that moment disappeared. She calmly explained that I needed to understand their situation, saying they lived in an exclusive neighborhood, and that appearances were important. She suggested that I try calling my sister in Portland. This hurt because she knew that my sister and I had not spoken in 8 years after our argument about George's funeral, and that I was not welcome there. Still, she suggested it. I said that I understood, even though my throat felt tight with unshed tears. At the same time, Louis was already closing the door, adding that I would surely find a solution like I always had. The door closed firmly, leaving me alone on their perfectly maintained porch. Through the frosted glass, I could see their silhouettes walking away, most likely going back to the expensive dinner I had interrupted. I stood there for several minutes, feeling shock and disbelief mixed with a deep pain that felt overwhelming. This was my daughter, my only child. I thought about the little girl who used to come to me during storms and who cried when I had to work late to support us. I could not understand where that child had gone. My phone buzzed with a message from Kaya. She said she was sorry, but agreed with Louis, adding that maybe this situation was a wake-up call for me to plan my future more responsibly, and mentioning that there were senior living facilities that could help. Senior living facilities, just another way of saying anywhere but here. I walked back to my old pickup truck, the only thing that survived because I had been in town when the fire started. My hands were shaking as I tried to start it, not knowing where I could go. The nearest motel was 30 miles away, and I only had $217 in my account. Sitting there, I felt the full weight of everything come down on me. I was 64, without a home, and unwanted by my own family. The farm that had been my life was gone, and the daughter I had raised had changed. But as I looked at their perfect house with its perfect lawn and perfect facade, something inside me began to shift. The heavy despair slowly turned into something stronger, something firmer that had been building for years as I watched Kaya become someone I barely recognized. I took out my phone and went through my contacts until I found a name I had not called in 15 years, my finger stopping over the number as my heart pounded, wondering if he would still remember me. Would he care enough to answer? There was only one way to find out. But as I kept looking at his name on my phone screen, a sudden realization came to me. My daughter had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had absolutely no idea who she had turned away. None of them did. And once they discovered what I had been keeping hidden all these years, their carefully built, perfect world would never remain the same again. Some bridges once set on fire can never be rebuilt. Kalia had been the one to light that flame. Sitting in the parking lot outside Kalia's house, I couldn't stop the memories from coming back. Each one cut deeply, reminding me of everything I had sacrificed for the daughter who had just shut me out. I remembered the day George passed away. Kalia was only 12 years old, crying so hard during the funeral that she became physically sick. I stayed with her the entire night in that narrow hospital bed, holding her as she struggled through her grief, promising her that everything would somehow be all right, even though I had no idea how I would keep that promise. George's life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses, the farm was already deep in debt, and I had a 7th-grade daughter who needed stability more than ever. So I did what I believed any mother would do. I worked. I worked constantly. I took on 3 jobs. Early morning shifts at Murphy's Diner, afternoon work cleaning houses for wealthy families on the hill, and night shifts at the textile factory whenever they were available. Kalia never knew about the nights when I cried myself to sleep, completely exhausted and unsure if I could keep everything together. She never saw me having peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, just to make sure there was enough money left for her school clothes. She was only a child and I didn't want her to carry that burden. But what hurt me the most was the way she began to look at me during those years. It was as if she felt embarrassed, as if my rough hands and tired eyes made me less than the other mothers, the ones who drove expensive cars and never smelled like grease from the diner. When she turned 16, she stopped inviting her friends over. Instead, she would say that it was simply easier to spend time at their houses. But what she really meant was that their homes were nicer, and their mothers more presentable. I wasn't the kind of mother she wanted others to see. I should have felt anger, but instead I worked even harder. I wanted to give her everything those other children had. I gave up my own dreams and any thoughts of a different future, convincing myself that it would all be worth it once she succeeded. Now, the irony of it all was impossible to ignore. After all those years of trying to make Kalia's life perfect, she had grown into the very kind of person who once looked down on us. But those memories were not only about her. There was another child connected to our lives in ways she never truly understood. His name was Ryan Caldwell. Ryan lived in the rundown house next to our farm. His parents were known in town for their drinking, something everyone was aware of but rarely spoke about openly. When Ryan was 8 years old, he started coming to our kitchen door around dinner time, always finding some small excuse. He would ask if we had any sugar, or if he could pet the cats, or if there was anything he could help with. But the truth was clear in his thin body and tired eyes. He was hungry, not just for food but for attention, for kindness, for a place where raised voices didn't mean danger. George noticed it before I fully did. One evening, as we looked out the kitchen window at Ryan sitting alone on his front steps, George quietly said that the boy needed someone to look after him, that something wasn't right in his home. After George passed away, Ryan became a constant presence in my life. Every morning before school, he would show up and help with farm chores without being asked. When I returned home from work, completely drained, I would often find that he had already taken care of feeding the chickens and collecting the eggs. One afternoon, when I saw him cleaning stalls that were supposed to be my responsibility, I told him he didn't have to do that. He simply answered that he liked helping and added that since I always took care of everyone else, someone should take care of me too. That was when I realized that this boy carried a kind of wisdom far beyond his age. Even at 9, he understood something about loyalty and care that many adults never learn. He knew that family is not always about blood, it can also be about choice. Ryan never complained about his home situation, even when his father came back drunk and angry. He never asked for help, though deep down I knew I should have done more. Instead, he would come over with his schoolwork, and I would let him sit at my kitchen table while I prepared dinner. On the worst nights, when the shouting next door became unbearable, I would sometimes find him asleep in our barn the next morning. Kalia accepted his presence only because I insisted, but she never truly welcomed him. She would complain whenever he joined us for dinner or family evenings, questioning why he always had to be there. I would explain that he needed us, that sometimes people choose their family rather than being born into it. She would roll her eyes and leave the room. Even at 12, 13, and 14, Kalia had already decided that Ryan Caldwell was beneath her attention. He was poor, wore second-hand clothes, and came from a family people preferred not to talk about. But I saw something different in him. A sharp mind that school couldn't fully develop and a determination that reminded me of myself when I was younger. By the time he was 15, he had taught himself computer programming using books from the library. At 16, he was already fixing neighbors' computers to earn money. And at 17 he was talking about college, about leaving our small town and building a better life. The last meaningful conversation I had with Ryan happened the night before he left for college. He had earned a full scholarship to MIT, something that still amazed everyone at our small town school. We sat together on the front porch, sharing coffee from a thermos while watching the sunset fill the sky with shades of orange and pink. He quietly told me that he would not have made it without my support, and wanted me to know how much that meant to him. I squeezed his hand and told him that he would have found his own way because he was stronger than he realized. He admitted that maybe that was true, but explained that I had given him something he had never had before, pausing for a moment as he carefully chose his words. He told me that I had given him a real family, one he had never truly had before. That was 15 years ago. Ryan Caldwell stayed in touch during the first years of college, sending Christmas cards and sometimes writing letters about his studies. Then life moved on as it usually does, and the contact became more and more rare. The last thing I heard through small-town gossip was that he had graduated from MIT and moved to Silicon Valley. People said he had started his own company, but I never paid much attention to those rumors. Now, sitting in my truck outside Kaya's perfect house, I looked at his name in my phone contacts. Edward Caldwell, the scared little boy who once helped me feed chickens, had grown into a man I barely knew. I wondered if he would remember the woman who used to make him peanut butter sandwiches and help him with homework. More importantly, would he even care that she needed help now? My finger hovered over his number as another painful thought came to me. I had raised 2 children in that farmhouse. One was my biological daughter, who had just shown that blood meant nothing to her when things became inconvenient. The other was a boy I had chosen to love, and who had chosen to love me back. Maybe it was time to see which kind of family truly mattered. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely hold the phone. 15 years. It had been 15 years since I last heard Ryan's voice. And now I was about to call him at the lowest point of my life. What if he had forgotten me? What if he was busy, successful, surrounded by people who would not understand why some old farm woman was interrupting his evening? But what choice did I have? I was 64, homeless, and apparently worthless to my own daughter. The truck was getting cold, and I needed to decide before the nearby motel filled up for the night. I pressed the call button before I could change my mind. The phone rang once, twice, then 3 times. With each ring my heart sank a little more. Of course he would not answer. Why would a successful businessman take a call from an unknown number at 8:30 on a Friday evening? I was about to hang up when I finally heard his voice. It sounded deeper now, more mature, but something in it made my throat tighten with recognition. It was still Ryan. My Ryan, even after all these years. I spoke very quietly, almost whispering, saying that it was Clara Hayes, Miss Clara. His voice changed instantly, full of emotion and energy. He recognized me right away and asked if I was okay. If everything was all right. He remembered. Not only did he remember, but the first thing he asked was about me. Tears began to fall before I could stop them. I apologized for calling him like this out of nowhere, explaining that it had been so long and that he probably had his own life now, maybe even a family and responsibilities. He stopped me firmly but gently, making it clear that I should not apologize. He said I could call him anytime, anywhere for anything, and told me to explain what had happened. So I did. I told him about the wildfire, about losing the farm, about going to Kalia's house and being turned away like a beggar. I told him how Louis had called me homeless, how Kalia had stayed silent, and how I had nowhere left to go. The words came out all at once, like something that had been held inside for too long. 15 years of distance disappeared in a single call. Ryan listened without interrupting, only reacting quietly, his sympathy slowly turning into anger. When I finished, there was a long pause that made my stomach tighten with fear. I wondered if I had asked too much, if I had relied too much on something that belonged to the past. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. He said that the person I described was not the little girl I had raised, and that what Kalia had done was unforgivable. The strong protectiveness in his voice reminded me of the teenage boy who used to get upset when others made cruel comments about my worn clothes or my multiple jobs. Even back then, Ryan had defended me more than my own daughter ever did. I said quietly that she was still my daughter, though the words felt empty. But he answered with calm certainty, saying that a daughter would never abandon her mother or call the woman who had sacrificed everything for her homeless. Then he said something that made my breath catch. He explained that to him, I was the only real mother he had ever had, and that no mother of his would spend the night in a shelter or a car. I tried to explain that I was not calling to ask for money, but he already understood that. He said that was exactly why he was going to help me. He asked where I was. I looked around the parking lot, still able to see Kaya's house, and said that I was in Millbrook, sitting in my truck outside her house, even adding that I knew how it sounded. He answered that it sounded like I was in shock, which was understandable, and then asked if I was able to drive. I said I thought I could. He told me there was a Marriott about 20 miles north on Route 9 and asked if I knew it. I did. It was the same hotel where Kaya and Louis had their wedding reception. I started to say that I could not afford it, but he immediately stopped that thought, saying that I would not be paying for anything and that he would call them right away and book a suite for me. He told me to go there, order room service, take a hot bath and try to rest, asking if I could do that. A suite at the Marriott was something I could barely imagine. I had no idea how much it would cost. But Ryan was speaking as if money simply did not matter. I told him that he did not have to do this, but he immediately replied that he did. He reminded me that I had taken care of him when he had nothing, and now it was his turn to take care of me. His voice became softer. He added that I would need to be well rested for the next day. I asked what he meant by that. He explained that he was flying out early in the morning and would arrive by noon. The words took a moment to sink in. I asked where he was flying from, and he said San Francisco, telling me not to worry about the details and to focus only on getting somewhere safe for the night. He assured me that he would handle everything else. San Francisco was 3,000 miles away. The thought that Ryan would drop everything and fly across the country just because I had called felt unreal. I told him he did not need to come all that way, that I only needed to hear a kind voice. He gently but firmly reminded me of something I had once told him before he left for college. I thought back to that evening on the porch, the coffee, the sunset. I said I remembered we had talked about many things. He reminded me that I had said family always takes care of family, that when someone you love is hurting, you do not hesitate or make excuses, you simply show up. Those words came back to me clearly. I had been trying to prepare him for life beyond our small town, teaching him about loyalty and love in ways his own parents never had. I quietly said that I remembered. He then told me that he was doing exactly that, he was showing up. Then he added that there was something else I needed to know about what he had been doing since leaving Millbrook. My heart started beating faster. There was a weight in his voice that made me feel this conversation was about to change. I asked what it was. He explained that the company he started after MIT had done well. Then he corrected himself, saying it had done more than well, that he was not just comfortable but wealthy. Very wealthy. The word stayed between us. Wealthy. The boy who once wore my late husband's old shirts because his own clothes were torn was now wealthy. I asked how wealthy, though I was not sure I was ready to hear it. He said that Forbes had estimated his net worth at $2.8 billion the previous year. The phone almost slipped from my hands. Billion, not million. Ryan Caldwell, the same boy who used to help me collect eggs, was now a billionaire. He told me he understood that it was a lot to take in, but said that what truly mattered was that everything he had achieved, every success and every dollar had started in my kitchen. He said I had given him the foundation that made everything else possible. I could not respond. My thoughts were spinning, trying to connect the boy from my memories with the man calmly speaking about billions. He then said that when he arrived in Millbrook the next day, we would go together to speak with my daughter and her husband. He said they would learn exactly who they had turned away. More importantly, he assured me that I would never have to worry about having a place to live again. He said he would take care of me the same way I had once taken care of him. I tried to tell him that I did not need billions of dollars, but he replied that he knew that, and that it was exactly why I deserved them. His voice became warmer, more gentle. He said that for 15 years he had been trying to find a way to repay me for saving his life, and that now he finally had the chance. After ending the call and starting the truck to drive to the Marriott, one thought kept repeating in my mind. Kalia had refused to help a woman who had raised a billionaire who still considered her his real mother. My daughter had no idea what was about to happen, but she was going to learn that some mistakes cannot be undone, and that some bridges once burned destroy everything around them. The boy I had chosen to love was coming back, and he was bringing enough power to change all our lives forever. I woke up in the most luxurious hotel room I had ever seen. There were Egyptian cotton sheets, a marble bathroom, and a breathtaking view of the mountains. For a moment I did not remember where I was or why I was there. Then everything came back at once: the fire, Kalia's rejection, and Ryan's call. Even in the daylight it all felt unreal. The frightened boy from next door was now worth billions, and he was flying across the country to help me. I checked my phone. It was 9:47 in the morning. He had said he would arrive by noon. I had just finished the complimentary breakfast when my phone rang. He told me that he had just landed at the regional airport and would be there in about 20 minutes. The way he said it stood out. Not that his plane had landed, but simply that he had landed, as if he owned the aircraft, which I was beginning to think he probably did. I asked if I should meet him in the lobby, but he suggested that we visit my daughter and her husband first if I felt ready. My stomach tightened. I said I did not want any trouble. He reassured me that there would be no trouble, only that it was time for them to understand who they had turned away. He added that I would not need to say anything if I did not want to, and that he would handle everything. 23 minutes later, a sound filled the air that made everyone in the hotel lobby look up. It was the unmistakable noise of helicopter blades growing louder. I stepped outside just in time to see a sleek black helicopter landing on the hotel's front lawn. The staff rushed around in confusion, likely unsure how to respond, while guests gathered near the windows to watch. The helicopter door opened and Ryan Caldwell stepped out. I could barely recognize him. The skinny boy in second-hand clothes had been replaced by a man in a perfectly tailored suit, moving with a calm confidence that comes from having the kind of power that can change the world around you. But the moment he saw me, his face lit up with the same warm smile I remembered from 15 years ago. He called me Miss Clara and walked straight toward me, wrapping me in a hug that made me feel like everything would be all right. He was taller and broader than I remembered, but his embrace still felt safe. I quietly said that he had grown up, and he answered that it was thanks to me. Then his expression became more serious as he asked if I was ready for what was coming. I nodded, even though I was not sure I was ready for anything anymore. The helicopter ride to Kaya's neighborhood lasted less than 5 minutes. Ryan had arranged permission to land in the municipal park across from her house, though I suspected someone with his influence did not truly need permission. As we descended, I noticed people stepping out of their homes, pointing at the helicopter. This was Woodlawn Estates, the most exclusive area in Millbrook, where the biggest excitement was usually someone buying a new BMW. A private helicopter landing there was definitely unusual. I quickly spotted Kalia's house, and then I saw her standing in the yard with Louis beside her. They were staring at the helicopter with the same confusion as everyone else. Ryan helped me step down from the aircraft, his hand steady and supportive on my arm. As we walked across the park toward the street, he quietly reminded me that I did not owe them any explanations and that I did not owe them anything at all. By the time we reached the driveway, a small group of neighbors had already gathered nearby, trying to keep a respectful distance. Louis attempted to look confident and in control, but I could see uncertainty in his expression. Kalia looked confused. She called out to me, asking what was happening and whose helicopter it was. Ryan stepped slightly in front of me, a protective gesture that reminded me of the boy who used to walk me to my car after late shifts. He addressed her calmly, saying that she had met his mother the night before. Kalia looked confused and asked what he meant. Ryan clarified that he was talking about Clara Hayes, the woman she had turned away and the one her husband had called homeless. His voice remained calm, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. Louis stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation, questioning who Ryan was and why he was speaking like that. Ryan introduced himself as Edward Caldwell, mentioning that he used to live next door when he was a child. He extended his hand politely, but something about the gesture made Louis step back slightly. I watched as recognition spread across Louis's face. Even in a small town like ours, Ryan's story had become well known. The poor boy who made it to MIT, built a successful tech company, and even appeared on the cover of Time magazine 6 months earlier. Kalia quietly asked if he was that Ryan Caldwell, the billionaire. Ryan responded simply that he preferred to think of himself as Clara Hayes' son, the one who would make sure she never had to ask anyone for help again. By now, the neighbors were moving closer, drawn by the tension and the unusual scene unfolding in the middle of their quiet street. Louis tried to speak again, saying that this was a family matter. Ryan agreed that it was indeed about family, and that was exactly why he was there. Then he turned directly to Kalia and explained that her mother had raised him from the time he was 8 years old, feeding him when his own parents would not, helping him with school, and making sure he had clean clothes. He reminded her that Clara had worked 3 jobs to provide for her own child and still made room for him. Kalia's face was turning red as she listened. She said that she had not known they were still in contact. Ryan explained that they were not, that the previous night had been the first time they had spoken in 15 years. He added that Clara had called him because she had nowhere else to go, because the daughter she had sacrificed everything for had turned her away when she needed help most. Louis tried to interrupt, saying they had their own family to think about. Ryan repeated the word family, with a bitter tone, and explained what it truly meant. He said that family does not abandon each other, does not call each other homeless, and does not care more about a Persian rug than about the woman who sacrificed everything for her child. By now, the neighbors were close enough to hear everything. I could see some of them taking out their phones, likely recording what was happening. I quietly asked Ryan to stop, placing my hand on his arm and saying that it was enough. He looked at me, his expression softening immediately, but replied that it was not enough, only a beginning. Then he turned back to Kalia and Louis and made it clear that Clara Hayes was the most important person in his life and always would be. He said that from that moment on, anything she needed or wanted would be provided without question. He reached into his jacket and took out an envelope, explaining that it contained the deed to a house located about an hour away, with 7 bedrooms, 10 acres of land and full-time staff. He added that if she wanted it, it was hers, completely paid for. Kalia stared at the envelope in shock. Then he mentioned that he had also created a trust fund in her name that very morning, $25 million. He said she would never have to worry about money again. Ryan spoke in a calm, matter-of-fact tone, as if he were talking about something ordinary instead of an amount that could completely change a person's life. $25 million. I felt lightheaded. The farmhouse that had burned down had been worth maybe $200,000, including the land. Louis looked like he might be sick. $25 million. Ryan continued, his eyes fixed on Kaya, saying that this was only the beginning. He explained that Miss Clara would not just receive a house and money, but everything he had. His resources, his connections, every opportunity his success could provide. He added that she would have a family that truly appreciated her. Kaya responded weakly that she already had a family. Ryan shook his head and said that she had a daughter, but that daughter had shown her the previous night that sometimes the family you choose is more loyal than the one you are born into. The silence that followed felt overwhelming. Even the neighbors had stopped whispering, sensing that something important was unfolding. After a moment, Ryan turned back to me and said that there was a car waiting to take me to my new home. He explained that the staff was ready, and that someone had been arranged to help me shop for anything I might need. He asked if I wanted to go see it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we started walking back toward the helicopter, Kaya called out, asking me to wait and saying that she wanted to talk. I turned slowly. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of everything had changed her. I asked what she wanted to talk about. She admitted that she had made a mistake the night before and tried to explain, mentioning that she and Louis had just been. But she could not finish the sentence, struggling to find words that could undo what had already been done. Ryan stepped forward again, his tone calm but firm. He explained that a mistake was something like forgetting to return a call or arriving late somewhere. But what had happened the previous night was not a mistake. It was a decision. And decisions have consequences. As the helicopter lifted into the air, I looked down at Kaya standing in front of her perfect house on her perfect lawn. And I felt something unexpected. It was not anger or satisfaction, but pity. She did not understand what she had lost until it was too late. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. And my daughter was only beginning to learn hers. The house Ryan had bought for me was unlike anything I had ever imagined. It stood on 10 acres of rolling hills, a colonial-style mansion with white pillars and wide porches, looking like something from a magazine. The staff, a housekeeper named Maria, a groundskeeper named George, and a cook named Elena, treated me with kindness and respect from the very first moment I entered. Maria warmly told me that this was now my home, and that Mr. Caldwell had made it clear that anything I needed or wanted could be arranged. That first week passed quickly, filled with a level of comfort I had never known. Fresh flowers arrived every day. Meals were prepared exactly how I liked them. A wardrobe consultant helped me choose clothes that actually fit me properly for the first time in decades. It all felt like something out of a fairy tale, except the one who changed my life was a billionaire who still called me his real mother. Ryan visited often, bringing small thoughtful things, books he thought I would enjoy, old photos from our neighborhood, updates about people from Millbrook. But mostly he just sat with me on the porch drinking coffee and talking like we used to. During one visit, he asked if I was happy there, watching me carefully. I looked out at the gardens, the small lake, and the peaceful life that had replaced my burned farmhouse. I told him it was beautiful, more than I had ever imagined. He gently pointed out that that was not what he had asked. I smiled, remembering how even as a child he always looked past polite answers to find the truth. I admitted that I was still getting used to everything, that it was a lot to take in. He suggested that we could find another house if I preferred something smaller or closer to town, but I told him this place was perfect. I just was not used to being the one taken care of. He took my hand and reminded me that I had spent more than 40 years caring for others, and now it was my turn. Later that same evening, as I was sitting with a book in the library, a real library with shelves reaching all the way to the ceiling and a rolling ladder, Maria knocked on the door. She informed me that my daughter was there, and needed to speak with me urgently. My stomach tightened. I had expected this moment, but that did not make it easier. I asked Maria to let her in. Kalia appeared in the doorway shortly after, her eyes wide as she looked around the room. She had clearly made an effort, wearing her best dress, her most expensive jewelry, her hair carefully styled. She stood there uncertainly, as if she did not know whether she was welcome. I invited her inside and asked her to sit. She sat on the edge of a leather chair, her hands tightly clasped together. For a while neither of us spoke. Finally she said that the place was incredible. I agreed. She admitted that she had no idea Ryan had become so successful, that she knew he was doing well, but not to this extent. Another silence followed. I could see she was struggling to find the right words. Then finally she began to speak. She said she had made a terrible mistake the other night, and that Louis had as well. She explained they were shocked, unprepared, and reacted badly, but said they never meant to hurt me. I studied her face, searching for real remorse but mostly saw panic. I asked what they meant to do instead. She said they thought I was independent and capable, that I would figure something out on my own, and that they didn't realize how serious it was. I reminded her that I had told her I lost everything in the fire, and asked how much more serious it needed to be. Her cheeks flushed. She said I was right, completely right, and then added that they could fix this. She explained that she and Louis had been talking and wanted to make things right, that they wanted me to come home back to their house. She said they had prepared the guest room, that everything was ready. New sheets, fresh flowers, everything I might need. And that I could move in that weekend if I wanted. A sad smile touched my lips as I asked about Ryan's house, his money and his trust fund. What would happen to all that? For a moment her expression slipped, showing something desperate underneath. She said I didn't really need all this, that the house was too big and impersonal, and asked if I wouldn't rather be with family. That was it. The real reason she came. She wanted me to give up the life Ryan had given me and move into their guest room, where they could stay close to me, and to the $25 million trust fund. I said I understood and slowly stood up. Then I asked what Louis thought about having his homeless mother-in-law move in permanently. She said he felt terrible about what he said and wanted to apologize personally. I replied quietly how generous that was. She stood as well and moved closer, asking me to please understand. She said they hurt me but we were still family, my real family. She added that Ryan was just someone I helped when he was a child, that it was a long time ago, and that maybe he was only acting out of guilt for not staying in touch. She said that when that guilt faded, I might be left alone again. Her words hit their target, bringing up fears I had tried to push away. What if she was right? What if Ryan's generosity was only temporary? But then I remembered his face when he stepped out of the helicopter, the protectiveness in his voice when he spoke to Louis, and the way he still called me his mother. I asked if she was worried he would abandon me the way she did. She flinched and said that wasn't fair, that they didn't abandon me. I reminded her she had slammed the door in my face, that her husband called me homeless and said I would ruin his Persian rug. She said they were protecting their home, their lifestyle. The words hung in the air between us. Then her composure finally broke. She admitted they were protecting themselves, from me, from my problems, from my neediness, from everything I reminded them of. Her words came out harsh and bitter as she spoke about growing up poor, being embarrassed by secondhand things while her friends had better lives. I felt every word like a blow, but said I did my best and gave her everything I could. She said she knew, tears running down her face, and that she was grateful. But she said she had spent her whole childhood promising herself she would never live like that again. Never be poor, never be looked down on, never have to worry about money. She said Louis gave her that security, and she was afraid of losing it. Then she admitted that when she saw me standing there, covered in soot and looking desperate, I reminded her of everything she had tried to escape, and she panicked. The honesty was harsh, but it was honest. For the first time since she arrived, I felt like I was speaking to my real daughter instead of someone pretending. I gently asked what she wanted now. She said she realized she might have thrown away the most important relationship in her life over something like appearances. Her voice became quiet as she said she wanted to fix it, that she needed to fix it. I sat back down across from her and said that what she needed and what she wanted might be different things. She asked what I meant. I said she might want to fix things because she now sees what I mean to Ryan and what that could bring, but asked if she actually wants me, her mother with all my flaws and past, or if she wants access to what my connection with Ryan gives her. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she admitted she didn't know how to answer. I said at least that was honest. She continued, saying she loved me, always had, even when she felt ashamed, and that losing me would destroy her. I reached over and took her hand. She hadn't lost me. But the relationship we had before, the one where I kept giving and she took it for granted, was gone. It burned together with my farmhouse. She asked what was left. I told her I didn't know yet. Maybe nothing. Or maybe something better than what we had before. But that is for you to decide. She squeezed my hand and asked how she was supposed to decide. I told her she should start by going home to Louis and thinking about what kind of daughter she wanted to be from now on. Not the kind she thought I wanted, and not the kind that would benefit her the most, but the kind that felt right to her. She asked what I would be doing while she was figuring that out. I looked around the beautiful library, thought about Ryan's next visit, and about the peaceful life I was beginning to build in a place where I was valued simply for being myself. I told her I would be living my life, and that for the first time in decades I would be living just for me. After she left, I stayed in the library for a long time, thinking about everything she had said. The truth had been painful, but it was also freeing. At least now I understood where I stood with my daughter. At least now I could stop hoping for something that had never truly existed. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from Ryan. He wrote that he hoped I was having a good evening and mentioned that Elena was making my favorite pot roast the next day. He said he was looking forward to joining me for dinner. I smiled, feeling the tightness in my chest ease a little. Some family is chosen, not born. And sometimes the family that chooses you can love you better than the one connected by blood ever could. Kalia would have to decide what kind of daughter she wanted to be. But I already knew what kind of son Ryan was. He was the kind of son who flew 3,000 miles to save the woman who had once saved him. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch, watching the sunrise color the mountains in shades of pink and gold, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Kaya's name. It was her 5th attempt to reach me that week. I let it go to voicemail. It was not that I was still angry. Anger required too much energy, and I had found better ways to spend mine. I had started learning watercolor painting with a teacher Ryan found for me. I was volunteering at the regional animal shelter, something I had always wanted but never had time for. I was even taking a literature class at the community college, finally reading books I had put off during those 40 years of working 3 jobs and raising an ungrateful child. Most importantly, I was learning what it felt like to be someone's priority instead of someone's responsibility. Ryan visited every week, sometimes even twice when he could. He would bring his laptop and work from my kitchen table while I cooked, just like he did when he was younger. Sometimes he brought colleagues with him, successful, intelligent people who treated me with genuine respect. He would introduce me by saying that I was Clara, the one who taught him everything that truly mattered about integrity and loyalty, and that everything good about who he had become started at my kitchen table. Last month, he surprised me by having that very kitchen table brought from the ruins of the old farmhouse. Somehow, it had been found among the debris, almost untouched. Now it stood in my new kitchen, worn but familiar, connecting my old life with my new one. My phone signaled a voicemail. Against my better judgment, I listened to Kalia's message. She said it was her again, that she knew I might be tired of hearing from her, but that she really needed to talk. She said things had become complicated and that she needed my advice. Her voice broke as she asked me to call her back. I deleted the message without hesitation. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences, and Kalia was still learning hers. Through people we both knew, I had heard what those consequences looked like. Louis had been passed over for a promotion after word spread about how he treated me. His boss, apparently, did not appreciate men who called their mothers-in-law homeless. Their reputation in Millbrook had fallen after the story spread. And in a small town, news like that always spreads. More than that, Louis's business had begun losing clients. Some of his wealthiest customers no longer felt comfortable working with someone who showed such disrespect toward family. In their world, reputation was everything, and his had become damaged. The financial pressure was growing. I heard they had to sell Louis's BMW, and were thinking about moving to a smaller house. The Persian rug that had once mattered more than me had been sold online 3 months earlier. But Kalia's real consequence was not financial. It was watching someone else receive what she had thrown away. Ryan had created a foundation to support single mothers in rural areas, women who reminded him of me during those years after George died. He invited me to join the board, and I discovered I had a natural ability to understand what kind of help would truly change those women's lives. Just last week, the foundation hosted a gala in San Francisco. Ryan flew me there, placed me in a penthouse suite, and bought me a dress that cost more than I used to earn in 3 months. I walked into that ballroom beside him, introduced as his mother, Clara Hayes, to people from all over, billionaires, politicians, and celebrities who already knew about me through his stories. That evening, the event raised $12 million for single mothers. $12 million that would go toward childcare, education, and emergency support for women facing the same struggles I once did. Standing on that stage and thanking the donors, I thought about the young mother I had once been 30 years earlier, working endlessly just to survive. That woman could never have imagined standing in a room full of powerful people, speaking up for others like her. The local newspaper later published a photo of Ryan and me from the gala. In it, we were both smiling, his arm around my shoulders, and I was wearing a silver necklace he had given me, a simple pendant that said, "World's Greatest Mom." I knew Kalia had seen that photo, because 3 days later she came to my house without warning. She stood on my porch, dressed simply, without the expensive clothes or perfect appearance she once had. She looked tired, older, and desperate. She said we needed to talk. I answered calmly that we really didn't. Then she said she had lost everything. She said that Louis had filed for divorce the previous month. She explained that he blamed her for ruining his career, and said that marrying her had been the worst decision of his life. Tears were already running down her face. She added that she was now living in a small studio apartment above a laundromat and working at the same diner where I used to work, Murphy's. I felt something inside me shift. It was not quite sympathy but recognition. I knew exactly what it was like to work at Murphy's, to come home exhausted and smelling like grease. The difference was that I had done it out of love to support my child. Kaya was doing it because her choices had finally caught up with her. I told her I was sorry she was struggling, and I truly meant it. But I also said that her problems were no longer mine to solve. She reminded me that she was my daughter. I answered that she was a 40-year-old woman who had made her decisions clearly and deliberately. I reminded her that she chose Louis over me, money over family, and appearances over love. Now she had to live with those choices. She said people make mistakes and asked if she did not deserve forgiveness. That was when I really looked at her. Not the frightened version she was trying to show, but the calculating woman she had become. I explained that forgiveness was not the same as being rescued. I told her I had already forgiven her months ago, but that did not mean I would save her from the consequences of her actions. She left after that, but not before I noticed her taking photos of my house with her phone, likely planning to use them for her own benefit. That morning Ryan was coming for our usual weekly breakfast. He had been traveling for the past 10 days, finalizing a deal that would reportedly add another $500 million to his net worth. Still, he had called every single day, checking on me and making sure I was well. I heard the helicopter before I saw it, that familiar sound that had become part of my new life. As he walked up the steps, I once again noticed how much he had changed, not just in success but in presence. He carried himself with confidence and strength, yet still looked at me with warmth. He greeted me affectionately and asked how I was doing. I told him I was perfect now that he was there. He sat beside me, taking the coffee Maria brought out, and asked if I had heard from Kalia. I told him she had called 5 times that week and that I had not answered. He nodded, approving of my decision, and said I had already given her enough chances. I admitted that sometimes I wondered if I was being too harsh. He took my hand and reminded me that for 30 years I had been too soft, giving everything until there was nothing left. He pointed out where that had led me. Standing at her door with nothing, asking for help. He was right, even though it was still difficult to let go of the guilt. I said she was still my daughter. He replied that he was still my son, and that the difference was that he had chosen to be. He said that every day he was grateful that I had saved him, while she woke up resentful that I had not been perfect. He reminded me that I did not owe her anything more than what I had already given. Later that afternoon, while Ryan worked on his laptop in the kitchen and I prepared dinner, I found myself reflecting on everything that had brought me here. The fire that destroyed my farm had once felt like the end, but in truth it had been a beginning, the beginning of understanding my own worth. My phone vibrated again, this time with a message from Maria Santos, a woman I had met through the foundation. She was a single mother of 3 from a small town in Nevada, working 2 jobs while trying to pay for her daughter's cancer treatment. She wrote that the foundation's emergency fund had covered her daughter's surgery, and that the doctors said she would recover. She said she could not find the words to express her gratitude, and that I had saved her child's life. I showed the message to Ryan. He smiled and gently squeezed my shoulder, saying that this was what truly mattered, that this was the legacy I was building. That evening, as I sat on my porch watching another beautiful sunset, I thought about Kalia working her shift at Murphy's, returning to her small apartment, likely looking at photos of my life and feeling sorry for herself. I thought about Louis, whose obsession with status had cost him everything. And I thought about myself, a 64-year-old woman who had lost her farm but discovered her value, who had been rejected by her daughter but embraced by the son she had chosen. Some stories do not end with reconciliation. Some end with acceptance. Acceptance that you cannot save those who do not want to be saved. That you cannot love someone into loving you back. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their own choices. My phone rang again. It was Kalia. This time I simply turned it off. The next day, Ryan and I were flying to Denver to visit another foundation project. The following week, I was meeting with a publisher who wanted me to write a book about resilience and second chances. The month after that, I was planning to take a cooking class in Tuscany, something I had dreamed of for decades but never believed possible. I was finally living the life I deserved, with people who chose me, valued me, and loved me for who I was. The boy I once saved had saved me in return. And this time I was wise enough to accept it. Some families are given by birth, some are built, and some are earned through years of loyalty, love, and sacrifice that are recognized and returned instead of taken for granted. I had finally understood the difference, and it changed everything. Now I am curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do in my place? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts. And on the final screen, I am leaving 2 more stories that viewers love. They might surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.